Hey everyone, and welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into a tool that solves one of the biggest headaches in cloud monitoring, the Cloudatch Embedded Metric Format, or EMF. It's all about finally connecting your metrics to the logs that give them meaning. So let's dive in and see how it all works.
So let's just start with a question for you. Are your metrics and your logs telling two completely different stories? I mean, if you've ever worked with modern apps on containers or Lambda, you've probably felt this pain. You see a weird spike on a graph and then trying to find the exact log entry that explains why it happened. It feels like searching for a needle in a haystack, right?
And this slide, this really lays out the whole problem. The old way, the traditional way, logs and metrics are totally separate. You're making one API call to send your metrics, another one to send your logs. They live in different universes, and connecting them is this manual, painful process. EMF just completely flips that script. It creates one single unified stream where your metrics actually live inside your logs, which means all that juicy context is automatically saved. All right, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about the headaches. Then, we'll introduce the embedded metric format as the cure. We'll break down the anatomy of an EMF log, look at how you actually put it into practice, and then, the best part, see how you can go from all this data to making real decisions. Okay, section 1. Before we jump to the solution, let's really spend a minute on the problem itself. All the headaches that come from trying to monitor these modern, short-lived, ephemeral resources.
Look, modern serverless apps, they're amazing, but man, they create a huge challenge for monitoring. You've got functions and containers that spin up, do their thing, and then poof, they're gone. And all the while, they're creating this fire hose of log data. Now, to track performance, you'd traditionally have to write totally separate code just to call the Put Metric Data API. This immediately creates a disconnect. That spike you see on a dashboard is now completely untethered from the specific request ID or the user ID or the error message that actually caused it. And you've got to do this all asynchronously, so your monitoring doesn't actually slow down your app. It's a mess.
And that brings us right to section 2 and the beautifully simple yet really powerful idea behind the embedded metric format. So what is EMF exactly? Well, it's just a JSON spec that lets you embed your custom metric data right inside your log events. You just write one structured log, send it off, and Cloudatch automatically finds and pulls out the metric data for you. The analogy here is perfect. Think of your log event as a shipping box. Your metrics are like a super detailed packing slip you tuck inside. Cloudatch can just read that slip without having to rip open the entire box. It's incredibly efficient. All right, let's get our hands dirty in section 3. It's time to pop the hood and really deconstruct the JSON to see what makes it tick. We're going to look at the anatomy of an EMF log. Okay, I know what you're thinking. At first glance, this JSON might look a little intense, but I promise once you see the pattern, it's actually super straightforward. This is a complete, simplified EMF log. You can see two main parts, this special underscore AWS block up top, and then your actual data fields like function version and time. Let's break it down piece by piece. First up, that AWS block. The easiest way to think about this is as a special signal. It's a flag that basically tells Cloudatch, hey, pay attention to this log, there's good stuff inside. And inside that block, you've got the timestamp for the event, and most importantly, this Cloudatch metrics array. This array is literally a set of instructions for Cloudatch. So what's in those instructions? We call it the metric directive. It has 3 key parts. First, the namespace, which is just a folder to organize your metrics. Then dimensions, which are the categories you use to slice and dice your data. Think of them as labels, like function version. You can have up to 30 of these. And finally, the metrics themselves, the names of the things you actually want to measure, like latency or orders processed. And you can define up to 100 metrics in just one log event. Okay, and this is the really clever bit. If you look closely, that AWS block doesn't actually contain the data values. It just holds references to other keys in the JSON. So when you say dimensions function version, you're just telling Cloudatch, hey, go find a key named function version at the top level of this object and use its value. Same thing for the metric named time. It just points to the key time 100. This is so powerful because it means the rest of your log, with all its rich context like the request ID, stays completely intact, stored right there alongside everything else. So that's the theory. Now let's switch gears to section 4 and talk about putting this into practice. How do you actually go about generating these logs? The workflow is honestly beautifully simple. Step 1, your app creates the log as EMF formatted JSON. Step 2, you send it to Cloudatch logs, which happens automatically in Lambda, by the way. And step 3, Cloudatch just takes care of the rest. It sees that _WS block, it extracts the metric, and it publishes it for you. No extra API calls, no put metric data, it just works.
So how do you actually make the JSON? Well, you've got two main paths. The easy way, which I'd recommend, is using the open source client libraries AWS provides for Node.js, Python, Java, and so on. They give you simple functions to add dimensions and metrics, and they build the whole JSON structure for you. And the best part? In Lambda, you don't even need an agent. The other path is the manual way. You build the JSON string yourself and send it using the Cloudatch agent or the putlog events API. This gives you absolute control if you need it.
And all of this brings us to our final section, number 5, from data to decisions. This is where we see the real payoff of using EMF, and I've got a really important pro tip for you. So here it is, the big payoff. With EMF, your data finally works together. That disconnect we talked about, it's gone. Your metrics and your logs are no longer telling two different, confusing stories. Now they are a single, correlated source of truth for what's happening in your application. So what does that actually let you do? Well, first, you can put these metrics on dashboards and set alarms on them, just like any other metric. But the real magic, the game changer, is when you have to investigate something. You can use Cloudatch Logs Insights to go directly from a metric value to the exact logs. Imagine seeing a latency spike. You can run a simple query, like the one on screen here, to say, show me all the logs where the time was over 100 milliseconds, and boom, you get back the exact request ID for every single one. That is the power of linked data. Okay, now for that pro tip. And seriously, this is a super important warning. It comes straight from the AWS docs. Be very, very careful with what you choose for your dimensions. If you use a dimension with high cardinality, that's just a fancy way of saying it has lots of unique values, like a request ID or user ID, you can get into trouble. If you make request ID a dimension, EMF will create a brand new, billable custom metric for every single request. You can see how this can lead to millions of metrics and a very surprising bill. So stick to dimensions for broader categories, function version, region, that kind of thing. So as we wrap this up, I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. What hidden insights are just sitting there waiting inside your application logs right now? By finally unifying your metrics and your logs with the embedded metric format, you can actually start finding those answers. Thanks so much for tuning in to this explainer.